It makes me want to do the,
Go ahead back.
There we go. And hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Hellbent for Horror Takeover, where Women in Horror Film Festival and Hellbent for Horror join forces to destroy everybody's conceptions of horror and good taste. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We have wonderful guests today. We have Debra Lamb and we have Troy Escamilla, who is the director of the great Teacher Shortage. And we're going to talk a little bit. He directed Debra, and Debra has been in multiple horror films over the years and highly regarded in that fashion. Folks who are listening, as we normally do it, this is a like pirate radio. Sometimes we go 10 minutes, sometimes we go 10 hours. No, we don't go 10 hours, but we go a good amount of time. We are always trying to just create that atmosphere that we're all missing right now. Any of you that are out there that love to go to horror conventions, and you have horror convention family that you're not usually able to see, or you are usually able to see and you can't see them because we're months and months into this thing. We're trying to recreate that wonderful moment after the bars close and we're still not ready to go home yet, and we all hang out on couches and we talk about whatever it is that we want to. And so we've got a little bit of horror royalty here to be able to talk about some of the things that have happened in the past and the present and the future. And you guys want to introduce yourselves? Debra, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Debra Lamb, and what do you want? I don't know how to introduce myself.
You did a fantastic.
That's okay. I can never do it either.
Hi. I'm Debra Lamb, and I've been around for a while. I'm considered people call me a horror icon, so there's that. I've won some awards. I've been in some really cool movies, one of which was Teacher Shortage, directed by Troy Escamilla. Yay!
Yay.
Yay.
That's your intro, Troy.
Oh.
Yes, your turn. Go.
Hey, I'm Troy Escamilla. I am a writer, director. I have written and directed 3 feature films so far. Party Night, Mrs. Claus, and Teacher Shortage. And yeah, so that's about it. As far as the horror stuff, yeah.
Welcome. And I guess, well, of course, we have the amazing and wonderful Vanessa Wright. How's it going, Vanessa?
It's going great, Scott.
As always.
As always. I'm doing good. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to everybody and just have some fun tonight.
Oh, Wonderful. And I see we have some of the folks who like to show up all the time coming on, and we're always grateful to see them. Hello, Carrie. We see you in the chat. Rick Sarah, wonderful to see you again as well. And Jason Thompson, always nice to see you. So
Yes.
wonderful. As normal, in case there's anybody who's new to the show, we'll give a little bit of an idea of how we tend to do things. We're going to be sitting in here talking about everything that we would like to talk about. And you guys can talk to us in chat. Anybody who's watching in Facebook Live Land, feel free to reach out by way of chat.
Yeah, if you've got questions, anything else, we'll make sure we're kind of keeping up. I have a quick sort of sidebar. Did anybody's Facebook the way it looks change? Because
I did. Yeah, I did.
because it literally just happened as I was trying to pull up the live, and I'm like,
I changed it.
Oh,
back.
really?
how do I access this?
There's an option to change it back. So yeah.
I don't know how to, I can't do it yet. So, but
I
I am going to do my best to follow along and keep it. Scott, if you're able to see him, you can grab him too. But
yeah, I can see it.
New and different to me.
Okay, let me see what I can do to maybe help out on that as well. I don't know. I somehow dodged a bullet. It looks reasonably close to me.
I
To
got
what
a
we've
whole
had
bunch
before.
of. We just changed. What color? Dark, light. This.
Oh,
I'm
really?
like,
So you're getting like,
I just want to see it.
Yeah, it's ugly.
nice.
Christopher G. Moore just stopped by. He said Troy's a cool dude.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
well, yes. Well, thank you, Christopher. We met him at Crimson when me and you were there.
Yeah.
Yes,
That was a really fun year.
that was.
It could have just been because we were there, but
probably.
it was a really good year.
And Christopher's come on here as well and talk with us. He's a really great guy. I do want to let people know that there is a possibility as we continue to go on that we'll break that fourth wall and allow some people to come on this Zoom. I'll give you a little bit of the riot act, though, as we normally do. We always like to make sure that we want to have you on here, but there's a couple rules that we'd like you to do if you're going to join the Zoom discussion. First off, you must have your video and your audio turned on to be able to join. We want to see the whites of your eyes if you decide you're going to give us any trouble. Any negging or hate speech or general ass hattery is going to get you booted from the show. And of course, it's going to be catch as catch can. Sometimes we get into such a great rhythm, we just don't have anybody come on. And sometimes we just get too busy. And so it's wonderful if you can get on. We're more than happy to take care of things, though, in that Zoom area and get to speak with everybody. So we're talking horror, and we're talking to someone who's an icon, Debra Lamb. So I want to ask the question, what was your first kiss with horror? What was the movie that got you excited or interested in horror? Were you a horror kid, or were you someone who, because of the industry, found your way into horror?
Well, when I was young, I was taking ballet. So I was, my intention was to become a professional ballet dancer. So from the age of 7 to 14, I was in a ballet company in Portland, Oregon, and we were doing a couple big shows a year, big theatrical productions. And so when I was really little, when I would go visit my grandmother and stay with my grandmother, she let me stay up late. So I would watch the old black and white films that would come on TV late at night. And so I was a huge fan of Vincent Price.
Mm.
But once I got back home, I wasn't allowed to watch those films. So that was only, at small periods of time when I got to stay with grandma that I got to see those films. The rest of the time, it was pretty strict in my house. So in fact, I think there was a period of time where I wasn't allowed to watch any TV at all. So growing up, it wasn't, when I got to see the films when I was little, I loved it. And I was in love with Vincent Price, but the rest of the time I didn't have any way to connect with horror. And then after I graduated from high school, I pursued an acting career. I, did all the dance and drama throughout school. And so I got into an acting class and, just did some modeling and started pursuing an acting career. And then just by the luck of the draw, it wasn't that I was pursuing being in horror films, but I worked with, I'd work with one director and they'd recommend me to another director. And as luck would have it, somebody recommended me to director Fredel and Ray. Do you know who Fredel and Ray is?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's pretty famous in that genre. And I did a couple films on at New Horizons, which was Roger Corman's studio in Venice. And one of the first directors I worked with was Kat Shea, who worked with Roger Corman directly, her and her, at that time, her husband. So I worked on Strip to Kill, and then I was brought back for Strip to Kill 2. And then somewhere along the line, I was introduced to Fredel and Ray by Ross Hagen, who I don't know if you know who that is, but he was very big in those days, and he's since passed. But he did a film called Born, Body Organ Replacement Network,
Right.
starring PJ Souls.
Yes.
Clint Howard was in it. I had a big scene with Clint Howard. So those were some of my first films. Then I was introduced to Fredel and Ray and worked on Warlords, starring David Carradine and Sid Haig.
Yeah.
And I was in a couple of scenes with Michelle Bauer. And then I ended up working with Fred a couple more times. And that circle of directors in those days, the late 80s, early 90s. So that's how I got into horror. It was just luck of the draw. And, you know, I've done a lot of different type of genre films, but I think it's really the horror, because the horror fans are so vocal and so fervently, you know, excited.
Pretty crazy loyal.
They're crazy.
Oh, so loyal. Yeah.
Very exuberant. They're so exuberant. So, you know, it doesn't matter how many other types of films I do. It's the horror fans that love those films that I've been in. So that gets the majority of attention, but I'm grateful for it. And then most recently, last year, I worked with Troy and Teacher Shortage. That's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since we're talking teacher shortage, Troy, obviously you're a big slasher fan, because there's quite an homage to slashers that is in there. I think Brinke Stevens is in there as well, one of the original 3 scream queens of the 80s, and
a dear friend of mine from way back.
And her death actually seemed as if it was very close to her premiere in Slumber Party Massacre. Thank you. That looked very much of the knife wound and everything. Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah.
And I think there was the apple with her picture in it, which was kind of a nod to Night School, that old Rachel Ward film. So I kind of love the homages that you had in there. What is it about the slasher film that so interests you?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. You know, it's interesting, because when you talk about, you know, films that made you fall in love with horror, the movie that made me fall in love with horror was Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
My parents took me and my brother to see it when I was, young, super young, and I just loved it. I mean, it scared the crap out of me, but when I left the theater, I was just in awe of what I just saw, and it kind of left all the impressions that it left on me, the different scenes, the iconic scenes from the film, and I guess from there, I was lucky enough that my parents were also huge horror fans. I mean, they talk about like their first dates were going to the drive-in and seeing like Night of the Living Dead and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they never had a qualm with letting me and my brother watch horror films. And I grew up predominantly in the 80s when, you know, the good old golden days of the video store.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, I used to go with my mom on the weekends, Saturdays, to go rent a movie. And she would always let me pick out a film. And right away, I'd go straight over to the horror section. And being a little 7-8-year-old kid, just stare at all the box art. And so many of them made such a huge impression on me. And I would just pick a film from the box art. And the majority of the time, it ended up being slasher films, you know,
like everything that is behind me.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you have the whole, yes, there's Sleepaway Camp. That was one of my first ones. Black
Wow.
Christmas is my favorite, horror film of all time.
The 1975, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. Yes, for sure.
Masterpiece.
But no, so I don't know. It was just the slasher genre just became one that I just gravitated towards. I feel like there's a familiarity with it. It can be very formulaic, which I guess that's some of the criticism of the genre, as slasher films are very formulaic. But I also feel like you can do, fresh things with the genre as well. I mean, look what, Wes Craven did with Scream that rejuvenated a very dead genre at the time. So for me, it's just I don't know how to explain it. It's just like a comfort food for me because it's what I grew up watching and loving. So, that's kind of what I wanted to do with my filmmaking is I wanted to make films that would kind of be nostalgic to kids like me that grew up loving the cheesy 80s slasher films like The Mutilator and, Slaughter High and all that stuff. Yeah.
I have to ask Troy something real quick. So when you were in the video stores looking, seeing these types of films and titles in the video store, did you happen to ever run across The Invisible Maniac, Beverly Hills Vamp, any of those?
I mean, I probably did. I've seen your films. I don't know if it was from that age though, when I was that young. I watched your films when I, cast you for teacher shortage. So.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
I always love when people talk about the box art because it's kind of like if you're an audiophile and if you were around during the days of albums, you used to go into like Sam Goody or Wall of Sound and you would walk through and you kind of knew what was in there already. It wasn't like you had to pick up every album and look at the album. You became so used to going into the store that you could go, okay, that's all these different, you could look for the color or the font that was different and that would be the new album. And it was the same with video stores with horror movies. I would walk in and I'd go, oh, I could tell you on the side box art what movie it was as I was rolling by. And I used to do the A to Z version, which was I'd see what I could find from the A's to the Z's. And video stores really did kind of save my life. I love that you talk about the slasher films that you bring up are really interesting ones. They're the really disturbing ones. And what I always say about
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're live, right?
Always. Like yeah, live without a net. I tell my son every Thursday, go ask daddy. But no, he's going to come in.
Yeah, there's
7 more times tonight.
I just thought we were having a moment from Poltergeist because of your background. We can't see someone come in. We just hear this.
Well, that's true. You just see my
voice.
Expression.
Yeah, your face kind of goes like that. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about some really interesting slasher films, some of the nastier ones. And I think what interested me, because I grew up in that time, and as Debra was saying about watching black and white horror movies, that's where I started with my horror host, Uncle Ted's Ghoul School in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And there was this thing about slasher films where up till then, even if you were looking at, say, John Carpenter's Halloween, there was still a nod to Hitchcock. There was a refinement that was trying to be done. There was a subtlety, restraint.
Yeah.
And then came Sean Cunningham, and you end up having this movie. And there were always outliers. It was like you got Last House on the Left, certainly did not shy away from anything. That's not considered a slasher, though. That's its own little beast. But then you have this movie, Friday the 13th, which was basically, taking something from Halloween, but just said, screw it, we don't care. We're going to go the entire way. And that was like, to a horror fan at that time, it was like punk rock. It was like suddenly showing up at CBGB's and everything changes. And it was so much fun. It was so relentless. And you had no idea what was going on. Sure, Twitch of the Deaf Nerd was before that. And all of those things were kind of in that. Giallo was already well established. But there was something very punk and very weirdly American about the slasher film in the beginning. What was some of your favorites that when you were watching, you were like, really, it wasn't that idea of it being comfort food. It was the idea that it kind of hit you with a curve.
Oh boy. From the 80s, gosh, a couple of them that really stand out to me, I would say, would definitely be Stage Fright, which is
Oh, wow.
it's
Yeah.
not a, I mean, it's not an American slasher film,
No.
but it's to me, it's a really good film. Obviously, it's has a lot of Italian giallo influence, but also I feel like does its own thing. And when you talk about punk rock, I mean, that's
Yeah.
that film. I also am a big fan of, like I said, I love The Mutilator, which I mean I know has its it's cheesy and everything, but again, there's just something about that film. And I like Party Night, my first film, was very heavily influenced by that film. Like when I was writing it and putting it together, like that's the film I had in mind, was The Mutilator, that kind of nastiness. I just love the atmosphere that film creates. And
Yeah.
then,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when we reference a lot of these slashers as being cheesy, I don't think we interpreted them that way at the time.
Yeah.
Which I think, it's interesting how, like, we'll go back and it's like, God, I just remember that being so terrifying. But now I watch it and it's almost comical. And it's like, was it actually comical then, but it just kind of went over our heads because of maybe the ages we were when we saw them. Like, I was very young when I started watching slashers. Actually, I watched the Friday the 13th movies out of sequence, but the first one I saw was, the third one, the 3D one. Yeah. And then
I was a huge fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street.
When
Nightmare on Elm Street came out in the theaters, I think that's one, and Poltergeist also, like what Troy said. But Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, was the film that I was really into, and
that was really dark.
And I think that film right there, I don't remember which came first, Poltergeist or that one, but both of those films, and The Exorcist, which I wasn't allowed to see till years later. I read the book, but years later, I and Carrie, I couldn't see Carrie at the time, so years later I saw it. But I think Nightmare on Elm Street was the one film that came out that I was like hooked.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a masterpiece. And just a moment of silence for the great Wes Craven. I mean, he is someone I mentioned, Last House on the Left. He's one of the very few writer-directors as well, that had a hit or changed and altered the careers of people and altered the stream of horror in 3 different decades. You're talking Last House on the Left, you're talking Nightmare on Elm Street, and you're talking Scream. Those 3 right there, 70s, 80s, and 90s, just at the right time, he seemed to land with something that was really interesting. I don't know. I love Nightmare on Elm Street, and Deb, I'm so glad that you mentioned that one. And also, your Exorcist story is the same. I came from a very deeply religious fundamentalist family, so the whole idea of demons was like it was real. I wasn't able to see the movie for a while, so it was the book, which scared the shit out of me. But the idea of Nightmare on Elm Street, my thing that drives me crazy, some people call it a slasher and others don't. I don't call it a slasher because it's supernatural. It happens in people's dreams. Just because he cuts teenagers does not make it a slasher. But I did want to ask, since you made a slasher, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I guess
where would you file that movie? File.
I guess you could call it I guess I would call it a supernatural slasher. I mean, I feel like there is enough slasher elements to the film that you can justify calling it a slasher film. I mean, it follows the slasher formula pretty faithfully. I mean, it has the final girl, the whole that element, and so I mean, I feel like I guess I've always considered it sort of a slasher film of some sorts. Now, is it a slasher film like Friday the 13th? No, but I feel like it still kind of fits in that genre. Like I said, maybe psychological or not supernatural slasher.
It's interesting. I'm wondering if that's its own little thing, because I've always seen it as something that released, it allowed supernatural to come back into horror, because for a little bit there, everything was slashers. By 1984,
There was that one in like '81 that came out, and I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's kind of obscure, but a lot of diehard horror fans know what I'm talking about. It was called Scream, and it was about, you know what I'm talking about. It was about the group of people that go to that ghost town, and that's a slasher film, but it's a supernatural slasher film. The killer is basically a ghost of the ghost town. So that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, so I think there are films that kind of fall into that supernatural slasher element. Like there's a movie called, isn't there one of Superstition? Another one that has supernatural elements to it, but it's a slasher film.
Yeah,
I think there's a couple of films called Superstition.
Yeah, there's the Jean Rollin one that I'm thinking of, which is.
Oh, I gotta just, because the thought just crossed my mind just this minute. I think also when I was, like teen years on TV, I would see there was a couple films that really affected me. There was a Barbara Hershey film. It came on TV, and she was
The Entity.
attacked by ghosts.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that.
Oh, that scared the bejesus out of me. And also, I know Sally Kirkland also, I believe Sally Kirkland also did something that was somewhat similar with ghosts, I think. You know, sorry if I'm wrong, but I remember the Barbara Hershey one, and it was on TV, and it really affected me. I was like, holy crap, because it's based on a true story.
Right.
Yeah. So
that always makes them extra.
Stories.
Yeah.
Huh?
That makes them extra scary, I think.
Yeah, when it's based on a true story. Yeah.
I think the director was Sidney Furie. I'm not sure.
Oh.
That name's coming up.
That was a good one. That was really good.
And I saw that in the theater, and what really freaked me out was the sound design of The Entity.
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah, The Entity. And the sound design of that was that dun, 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 dun noise when the thing would appear was the sound in my head when I was a kid, when I would get really scared. And I was like, how did they find out that noise? Does everybody have that really crazy noise when they get really frightened? I loved it because it was everything that, and the first Paranormal Activity really hit on my childhood of being afraid of demons being right next to you and just there to screw with you. So there's a scene in The Entity. Well, there's the great scene in The Entity where it first attacks her and she's combing her hair and she just feels like something's in the room and she gets hit. And they just have this slap noise and she turns back and she comes back and she's bleeding. And the look on Barbara Hershey's face is so astonishing because she's like, what? She's trying to figure out what just happened in a way that is not over the top. She's like, really? Is this blood? And by the time she's getting to that point and touching her tongue, she's picked up and thrown to the bed by an invisible force.
Yeah.
And that is like right out of my nightmares, right out of my parents' highly fundamentalist beliefs that if I sin in any way, shape, or form, that's what was going to happen to me. And so I was
and I think a lot of people can kind of connect to that, because I think if you break it down to what really scares a lot of people, it's kind of that loss of control. So if there is something that is able to take you and control you and you can't even see where it is, I mean, that's terrifying. You know, I mean, that, at least for me, I mean, that's you can't see it, but it's going to get you. And you have no way to stop it. And that movie, I mean, it gets hurt more ways than than one.
The thing that really creeped me out was how well they did in daylight. And that's one of the things that in the original Paranormal Activity, they create this rhythm of everything horrible happens at night. And then towards the end of the movie, the thing blows and pulls her hair up while she's talking in broad daylight. And it completely freaks you out because you weren't ready for it. It did not follow the pattern. In The Entity, there's the birthday scene. So the Barbara Hershey's having her birthday, or the one of the kids is having a birthday, and she runs. She's going across the kitchen. They're all laughing and everything, and she just bumps into something that we don't see, and it all happens right then and there. And there's nothing. You know, it's all acting. She has to do this thing of banging up into something. A little bit of sound effect with that, but the idea that you would have that happen in your family and in front of you, in front of your kids. And it's just that's where I think horror works so well, on our anxieties about things that we don't want to talk about, that we're afraid of. If you're a parent not being able to protect your kids, she's laying there and her kids are getting knocked around by this thing. And it's like, man, there's so much to it. Troy, I wanted to ask you about your movie. So I watched your film, Teacher Shortage, and it's interesting because it's a take on slashers usually attack the teenagers, right? But here we are. It's actually the faculty that's getting taken out in this film. What I truly believe that every horror film can't help but have a little bit of commentary to it, because it needs to know what scares you to want to scare you, and our anxieties or whatever's happening in the news and all of that stuff. So I couldn't help but, you didn't make it yesterday, but right now we're in this moment where teachers are under fire. Are they going to go back to school? Are they going to go through this whole thing of COVID? Are they pawns in a big game? Is it all overblown? And so teachers all of a sudden are under this thing. And for a decade at least, teachers have been, they're either getting paid too much, or there's something happening to the idea of our educators. So what were you trying to say? Because in a way, your teachers are horrible fucking people. I mean, they're like shitheads, every fucking one of them. I mean, I could see having one of them, but every one at that dinner table was like, I just want to like throw bowling balls at these people. So what was it that you were trying to go at with this story?
I'm glad you this is Facebook Live, right? So this is going to be.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Oh crap! No, just kidding. But no, I am an educator. I've been in public education for 18 years now. I was an English teacher for 10 years, and now I'm a librarian at a high school. I've been doing that for 8 years. This is my 8th year. So yeah, I had a lot to say about education and the state of education that I kind of wanted to, or attempted to, infuse in the script kind of subtly. And I feel like, when teachers watch the film, I really hope that they do kind of recognize a lot of what is said in the film is what really goes on. And in fact, I mean, each of those characters in Teacher Shortage, right down to Debra's character, Sue Steele, were basically modeled after teachers or people that I've interacted with being in education for so long. So I think that's maybe why they each have kind of these distinct personalities, is because they're kind of based on a combination of different people that I've worked with. But moreover,
yeah, it felt personal.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It is. And I mean, I wanted to do something a little bit different because, like as I said a few minutes ago, there are ways, still, even though the slasher film is very formulaic and people that are slasher fans, I think, like that formula, there are still things you can do that make it a little bit different. So I wanted to kind of flip things up a little bit and make the teachers be the victims this time around instead of students, because I feel like the teacher characters are a lot more maybe interesting, and you're getting a peek into the lives of people that you generally might not get to see portrayed. And so that's kind of what my take on it was. But yeah, there was a lot of commentary infused about the current state of education, and what's going on in education. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. And, it kind of flips things up with kind of having a different sort of, final girl, so to speak. So I kind of did something a little bit different there as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, a lot of the dialogue in that film is actual stuff that I've heard come out of people's mouths.
Wow.
So,
I'm sure, especially that one scene where I'm addressing the teachers in the conference room, I'm sure a lot of that is from direct experience.
oh, that's one. Yeah, that basically is a conference. That's basically a department meeting that I've sat in many, many, many times.
Yeah, no surprise there. I mean, some of the stuff really did feel like we were flies on the wall. And it's so funny because it's just a different time period.
Well, it's even the scene with this kind of the scene with Brink, Steve, Brink's scene where the mom is, there
texting,
blaming basically her for her son getting a failing grade. I mean, that's how it is nowadays. Everything is a teacher's fault now. So it's I kind of put that in there because that's happened to me many times with a student getting a bad grade and the parent calling me, asking me why did you give my student this grade, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was meant to be kind of a commentary on the education system, but of course done in, slasher film format. So there is all the blood and, nasty death scenes and stuff. So
did you actually have this weird tradition that Debra's character has of like forcing everybody into the shittiest dinner ever?
Yes.
Like to have this power struggle? Sort
of. I wanted it to be a little bit more elaborate in the script in terms of like location, but just budget wise, it just made more sense to keep it at kind of a centralized location, which was a house. But yeah, one of the schools I taught at, the department chair had like every year she would have these 2 different like professional development retreats that we had to go to. And, one of them was around Christmas time. It was supposed to be a Christmas party, and we would go to her house and do all this stupid crap. And then another one was, going just bowling or whatever, some activity. But it wasn't, it was always under the guise of, oh, this is going to be fun team building. But it ended up just being nagging about what we need to do, what we need to be doing better as teachers, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, so that's kind of, that does happen.
How did it come to be? Like, I mean, Debra, did he send you the script? Was there something about it that really spoke to you that you were like, yeah, I really want to do this? Like, tell us a little bit about how you guys got together on this.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how Troy and I hooked up. I mean, as far as, me doing teacher shortage, I can't remember if did you reach out to me, Troy? I don't remember.
It's been a while. I think, yeah. I know I had a lot of actresses kind of show interest in, especially for your role. I remember sending you the script and getting your stuff back, and I thought that you definitely, embodied the character a lot better than what I was getting. So I very much saw you as Sue Steele in my mind, because again, the character is based on somebody that I know, luckily, that isn't a Facebook friend. So
yes, are they here?
I'm looking.
I read the script and I just loved this character. There is a part of me that is Sue Steele. As we all do, we have different facets to our personality, but one of the facets to my personality is a very like officious, rules oriented, kind of like getting everybody on board for the greater good type of personality. That's one of my personalities. Of course, I also have a very rebellious type of personality too, that like complete opposites. But Sue Steele definitely embodies one of my traits, And so I just really, when I read it, I loved it. I'm like, I'm Sue Steele. And I told Troy, I said, oh my God, that's so me.
Well, and what I liked about, Debra's performance and interactions is like, when you watch the film, her interactions with each of the characters is her approach with each of the characters in the film is very different. Like I love, like her interaction with David McMahon's character, Mr. Curtis, is very different than her interaction with like, the young first-year teacher or Haley's character. So I liked that. All the actors. I mean, I couldn't have picked a better cast because they all really worked extremely well together.
Speaking of David, he was here just a minute ago. I saw him. He said a hello. I don't know if he's still watching, but he should say hi for real.
Oh, David McMahon. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
David. Yeah. My approach to Sue Steele was that she has been in this game many, many, many years. And, you know, and her and Coach Curtis, or not Coach Curtis, but what do we call him?
Mr. Curtis.
Mr.
Curtis. So her relationship with Mr. Curtis goes way, way back, and there's a lot of contention, but like a love-hate kind of relationship.
I
But
sensed some history there.
Yeah.
there's a lot of history there, and you know, we actually discussed that at one time they had an affair.
That's what I was
Ah.
going to ask, actually. Since you have multiple characters, multiple ways of dealing with characters, you're playing the card sharp, you know, constantly switching around to each person, trying
And
to figure out.
she's a bit of a phony, you know. She's trying to get what she wants out of every person. Yeah.
Did you find that? Did you spend time with each actor and come up with sides? In other words, some background stuff on things, or did you have just you looked at the kind of character and you decided a way that you were going to act every time you were with that person?
David McMahon and I actually did have some discussions about our characters' relationships, or relationship. And then the other one would be Chris Jenner. We talked about it too, because he was the young newbie, you know, teacher. And yeah, I think I pretty much had at least some discussion with each person. My relationship with Samantha Marie, who played, what's the character's name?
Alice.
You know, it was just like, I was so dismissive of her.
Yeah. She so badly wanted to talk about her Poe curriculum.
Yeah, right. The Poe
Nobody
curriculum.
would listen to her.
And I had fun with the whole cast. Well, what made it really special was that Troy had rented this house for us to shoot in, and the majority of us stayed there. I think everybody stayed there except for Troy, who lived not too far away, and Samantha was there, and Derek, the cinematographer, was there, and Chris Jenner was there, and Kaylee Williams, and who else? Oh, Michael Tula.
He lives in Houston, so yeah.
He wasn't staying there, but the majority of the cast was staying at this house.
That's because I was poor and couldn't afford to put you in a hotel.
But you know what?
No, it was
fun. It was yeah.
That sometimes makes for the best, you know, circumstances. You know,
awesome.
film camp.
It was awesome.
It was all. That's what I've done with all my films. Is I get the cast to stay together because
we loved it. We loved it. It was the party house. Oh my God! One night. It was.
We're forgetting.
Yeah, let's talk about some behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, we're forgetting Mel Heflin, and also
Roger Connors.
Roger was staying there. Oh my God, Roger! I love him to death. And also Trista. No, not Trista. You know. Oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. You know, the blonde.
Tamara Glenn?
Yes, Tamara. So she came in later. She wasn't there right at first. Yeah. But the first few people that were there were Roger Connors and Chris Jenner and Samantha Marie and Derek Huey and me and Kaylee Williams. We were all staying in the house. Later on, Mel Heflin showed up and Tamara Glenn showed up. But it was a wonderful bonding time. We had so much fun. One night, okay, I don't know if I should be saying this, but one night we teabagged. We teabagged David McMahon, but not with actual balls.
What did you use?
We used tea bags. We teabagged.
So you literally teabagged them.
I don't know. We put together. I don't know. We were drinking tequila, and we put together a couple tea bags, wet, soggy tea bags on some kind of stick. I don't know what.
Hmm?
I wasn't there.
I have pictures.
Oh dear.
Oh my gosh. So how long was
Well-
this shoot? Like start to finish, like, you know,
Like
once you
a week, over a
No,
week. 10
well, it
days?
was we
9 days, 10
no,
days.
it was longer than 9 days. It was we filmed the Brinks Stevens scene and then that opening classroom scene. We filmed that way back in December.
Yeah, that was before. Yeah.
Over a course of 3 days, and then the rest of the film was filmed in 16 days.
Mm.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So-
I was there for I think 9 or 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're taking, since we're talking about the teabag incident, which we didn't know anything about, but I am not surprised. So, Troy, you know, one of the movies that we all
Yeah, I
talk
played
about.
Roger was the instigator on that one.
Fair
And
enough. He's
Samantha.
not allowed
Roger
in here.
and Samantha.
Yeah, but anyway, the thing about that I was going to bring up is one of the slasher films that people talk about a lot is Slumber Party Massacre, and so in that movie there's a big reveal, but at the same point it's one of the creepiest films because everybody is gross and sexual and
Yeah.
inappropriate. This has to be the most inappropriate fucking high school I've ever seen in my life that you've made. Like rapey you. It's like everybody is like handsy and saying really inappropriate shit, and even
The scene
secretary.
with Mel Heflin.
Yeah. I mean, so what were you trying to get at there? Was that part of your thing, like an homage to a slasher film, or was it like Peyton Place meets this high school?
You know, hey, sex sells, right? So, but I mean, you hear the stories about public education. So again, I just want to. I mean, all I'll say is a lot of what I experienced went into the script. Not me personally, like doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, you'd be surprised what goes on. But
I liked the hazing in Stirring. The hazing.
we're going back to that. Yeah. That was. Yeah, but
that was brutal.
yeah, but no, like Brink's whole scene and teacher shortage. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm surprised that more people that have seen the movie. Obviously, not a lot of people have seen the film because it's not out yet. But I'm surprised more people that have seen it haven't kind of mentioned that it is very much an homage to Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? Here's the thing. Brink was in Mrs. Claus as well. That's how I worked with her first there.
Yeah, this is your second time working with her, right?
So when I was writing Teacher Shortage, I wrote the whole scene with that character, and immediately right after I wrote the scene, I didn't even finish the script. I contacted her and I said, hey, I have this. I'm working on my next script. I have a role for you. It's not prominent. It's not nearly as a prominent role as you had in Mrs. Claus. But if you don't do this, I'm just going to cut the entire scene. And when you read it, you will know why I want you to do this so bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Janet Leigh.
Yeah. So I sent her the script, and like about, I don't know, it wasn't even maybe a half hour later, and she responded. She's like, absolutely. She's like, I cannot believe nobody has thought to cast me in something like this before. But yeah, she's like, I'm absolutely down. So yeah, it's very much an homage to her scene in Slumber Party Massacre. Spoiler, sorry. But I mean,
I'm gonna have to watch Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah.
I mean, right down to like her arm dripping the blood on the floor. She's trying to wipe it up. That was all very intentional. So.
Yeah, and that's actually a great. You should watch that one, Deborah, because that's considered a feminist horror film.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've seen a few other of Brink's films, and of course we go way, way back, and we were actually in a film called Mob Boss together. It was one of the Fredel and Ray films starring Eddie Deason, and it was, I did my scene in it. and I had no idea that Brink was in it. So I was always saying, you know, I've never done a film with Brink. And then eventually somebody said, yeah, Brink was in Mob Boss. And I'm like, oh, I should watch that movie. I never saw it. So we actually were in an 80s or 90s film together. But yeah, I should watch that one. I like the slime Bolorama.
Yes.
Already made from the slime.
Yeah.
But Brink is so fun.
Yeah.
I mean, Brink is so fun to work with, and she's a trooper. Yeah. She'll really do anything that you ask her to do. I mean,
yeah.
Look at what, you know, her scene at the end of Mrs. Claus. You know what I made her do there. I felt so bad. She, you know, had a tube shoved in her mouth, squirting out gallons of blood into her mouth, and she was just fine with it. You know, I mean,
she's a trooper. I worked with her in a film called Disciples. That we shot in 2012, and it came out a few years after that. So I think on IMDb it says that it's like came out in 2015, but Brink was in it, and I worked directly with Brink. We had a lot of fun, and Linnea Quigley was in it, and Debbie Rashawn.
Yep.
Did anybody ever see it?
Which one is it?
Oh, it's called Disciples.
I'm gonna have to look it up. I am the queen of not seeing stuff. Like, that's become a huge joke on here with Scott and I, because anytime he's like, "Oh, have you seen this?" I'm like, "No, I haven't seen that yet."
I was one of the executive producers on that film, and it had everybody. It had I actually get to kill Tony Todd.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah, it has Bill Moseley, Brink Stevens,
I don't know.
Debbie Rashawn.
Okay, I'm gonna go find this movie. Disciples. Yeah.
Camden Toy is in it. Angus Scrimm. It's one of Angus Scrimm's last films. I don't think it's the last film that he was in, but it's one of the last films that he was in. Alyssa Dowling is in it. Who else?
A whole lot of people.
Yeah,
and this was 2012. You said?
Well, we shot it in 2012. It came out a few years after that. So
where can we see it? Is it
Amazon?
Amazon? Okay, Amazon. We'll find it. We can definitely even post a link to it as well, so people can see it. That's another thing we like to do. I mean, anytime, any projects, anything, like, please let us know. We will get the links posted, because I know people are watching. We get a lot of views after these are done too, where people can go.
Well, yeah, there you go. Well, see, Party Night and Mrs. Claus are both on Amazon Prime, and
yes, and Teacher Shortage is still doing its best, right? Or is it?
What's really, really sad, and I'm so sad, is it's having actually its world premiere. It's like very first live screening tomorrow night at Days of the Dead in Annapolis. And I so wanted to go, but unfortunately, I mean,
don't go.
It's yeah.
Don't go.
They can't go.
It's not safe. Don't go.
Just the timing. I mean, it's not their fault. I totally get it. I love Days of the Dead. Julie Philpott is her husband, I believe, runs it. And she's in Teacher Shortage. So
that's right, Julie. I love Julie.
She well, I guess I don't want to say too much. Her role doesn't give anything away, right?
No, I mean, she's the bartender. Yeah,
okay.
She does a great job.
I loved her. I loved her in TV.
Oh yeah,
she's a good friend of mine.
But, I'm gonna rely on her. I'm gonna rely on her to give me feedback and how it was perceived. But you know, I mean, I live in Houston, so traveling up there, I would love to be there, because, like I said, it's the first time people are gonna see it outside of.
Right. Understood.
So many things have been kind of shut down because of it.
Yeah.
I wonder, Scott, do you want to play the footage from Teacher Shortage, that clip?
Actually, what I'm going to be doing is I've just put out the Zoom list, and I think we've been going for about an hour. I think it's about time to let some of these people who are really interested in sending us a bunch of questions start answering some of those.
Yeah, I'd love to answer some questions.
Let's do it.
So one of the things that was asked of us was, are there any changes in the film industry for you folks, filmmaking, that maybe were changed by COVID, that you think are going to stick, that you think is a good idea, that might stick because of how things went once COVID is over? You guys have any answers for that?
You know, I honestly, I hope not, because I feel, I'm one of those people, they're desperately wanting things to get back to to normal.
Right.
You know, and I would hate, you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I hope that there's really nothing that is currently happening because of COVID that sticks, because I feel like everything that's happening because of COVID is, you know, distancing and less people on set and this and that. And I would just want things to be back to, I'm sure all of us do. I just want things to be back to how they were. I just feel like this is just such a unique time. I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't know if
I
Deborah.
think as far as maybe something that could be positive that could come from this is just more of awareness of keeping the sets safe.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's tough. Yeah, we all want to get back to filming. You know, I know there's a lot of indie people now that
Are doing
don't necessarily have to play by the rules because they're non-union and they're filming,
Right.
but it's like, you know, rules are kind of there to keep people safe. And even if you are non-union,
Mhm.
you know, and you're doing something, I would still, like, I always run my sets
Yeah.
like union sets, even if we're not, just because I think it's good to adhere to those rules. So I think the positive that would come of that is just more of an awareness for safety and keeping track of.
Yeah.
I mean, what I do hope is that these last few months have really allowed filmmakers or just people in general to be more creative, because there's really nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really hope that people are, you know, having projects ready so that when this does pass, they can get right to them and put out some great stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of writing going on.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of thinking that there might be a hybridization for certain things. Like, I think for filmmaking, there needs to be a way to figure out how we can keep things a little bit safer. But I think more on the audience side, say conventions. Like, it sounded like you were thinking about going to Horror Hound, and I think that the idea of going to conventions may change. I don't think we should ever be done with like what keeps vendors alive, right? The idea of being able to have pressing of flesh and seeing people and all of that. But I think that there's also something to be said about missing an audience that until now we haven't done anything with, which is the people who can't travel. There are people who would love to go see some people that it used to be where there used to be only events in New York, LA, Chicago, and a couple other smaller areas like maybe Philadelphia and stuff. And now there are places everywhere, but many of these may not bounce back after an entire year of not having the ability to work this. How about doing things where it's virtual, certain parts have a paywall, and have certain aspects of the conventions where people from New Zealand, like I was at a New Zealand convention this year because they were about to lose their shirts, and it was a Babylon 5 thing. So they had all the people from the old science fiction show Babylon 5 in all their different areas talking people behind a paywall. So you paid your $10 to come in and listen to a Q&A, and everybody's in their houses, you know, and they're just being able to talk and do this. So my thought is that we don't want that to be the new normal, but that might be something that has been missed that could actually make your movie bigger. Like Etheria Film Festival just played, and Etheria is a one-night show that happens in LA. It's all women. It's to celebrate women directors and writers in horror, science fiction, action. And this year, it didn't seem like it was going to happen. It's a one-day thing. And what they did is they put it online. They did the Q&As and certain panels in advance and had those on a pay window, and you could go and watch those. But they also got in with Shudder. So Shudder, the streaming service, took all of those short films and put them on as something that you could watch. And Heidi Honeycutt and a few other folks did intros to it. I'm forgetting her name now. John Carpenter's wife, the producer. Oh my goodness, forgetting. Oh, it's
Deborah
terrible.
Hill?
Deborah Hill. Oh no, Deborah's
she did
sadly passed. But Mother Production. Her nickname's Mother Production. I can't think of it. But anyway, she came on and did an intro. But all of those filmmakers who maybe would have 150 to 200 people in attendance at the Egyptian Theater of that night to see their short film, to see about it getting an award, suddenly had an international audience if people knew about it. on Shudder. And I think that there's something that can happen for, say, folks like yourself who have a film that's going to show at something like, is it doing a premiere at Horror Hound?
Days of the Dead.
Days of the Dead. I'm so sorry. I get them mixed up sometimes. So Days, which is the one that's continuing to go. I will say that it would probably be better for you to have it online. Now I'm going to talk a little rudely here, but I've been to many a convention that has film festivals.
Oh yeah, me too.
They just tack them on.
Yeah,
it's like Spinal Tap and Puppet Show.
Well, yeah. I mean, actually, it was when Mrs. Claus is the name that the distributor gave the film. My original film and my original title and the title that it played festivals was Stirring, like Not a Creature Was Stirring. So it's called Stirring, and actually it played at Days of the Dead back in 2018, I think. And yeah, it was kind of disappointing because they had it playing at midnight, and I was all excited, and I went like there was like 2 people.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, so it is when you have a convention going on with a film festival. Yeah, it is really difficult to balance the two. That's why Crimson was probably the best experience I had because it played and that the audience.
That was a full house.
Yeah.
I was in that screening.
The one just recently, like a couple weeks ago.
Well, that one didn't happen. My teacher shortage was supposed to play at Crimson this year, and it
didn't happen.
It didn't.
No, they had to cancel it.
Yeah. But they still gave out their awards.
Yeah.
Oh. Because you
That's
won.
phenomenal. That is a phenomenal fest.
Yeah,
Troy won Best Director for Teacher Shortage. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It was awesome. I have 2 of them now. Woohoo.
And in the waiting room.
For Best Director.
Huh?
For Teacher Shortage or Best Director?
I have 2 Best Directors from them.
The other one's from Stirring?
Stirring, yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
So we do have some people who are waiting to get in to say hello to us on Zoom here.
Okay,
and
yeah.
for folks who are out there in Facebook land, if you want to try and get in, I did pin the link, and feel free. You do have to have your video on, but we're more than happy to have you. And it looks like we have Mike Wright. If I remember correctly, Mike is an editor, a film editor. So let's see if Michael is still there. Ah, there we go.
There he is.
Oh, I see him.
I see him. Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I am excellent. How are you guys?
Hey.
We're doing well.
Good.
So
having fun, talking horror.
Yeah, talking horror and talking conventions and stuff like that. So you were just listening to the conversation that we were having, and I know you've probably been to a few conventions where you've seen some festivals that were a little bit not so great. What are your thoughts on getting this to where we hybridize some of these conventions or festivals?
Online or
yeah, online and actually being there. So you can show there live, but also have a piece that's online for those that can't get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that beats. I haven't been to a lot of festivals, honestly. I've been to very, very few festivals. For some reason, I never got into the whole convention and festival thing. I went to Comic-Con, obviously, a couple times down in San Diego, but I'm not sure what it was. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I full on enjoyed it. It was so much fun. It was so fun watching Lou Ferrigno do everything he could to get people to buy his book. And nobody was buying his book. I felt so bad, but
Lou.
But we had a nice talk about Bill Bixby, and we talked about Kenneth Hall, I was trying to remember Kenneth Hall's name.
Oh, Ken's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, I think that was his name, right? Didn't he do V? Was his name Kenneth Hall or Kenneth? Now I'm forgetting his name again.
Well, there is a Kenneth Hall, but he does fabrication. He's directed and written a couple of films. He directed some films and wrote a bunch of films. And
yeah,
I don't know if it's the same one you're thinking of.
Too.
Well, Kenneth Johnson did the 1980 version of V.
That's the person I was trying to think of when we were talking. So
I've seen V.
The challenge for me is, even though I never went to these festivals, I can't imagine something really taking the place of those.
No.
Because standing in front of Lou Ferrigno, it was that you can't you can't substitute that. Even if
No.
you're conversing with them on Zoom or something.
No.
You know?
And I
You know
think,
what I mean?
like, Deborah, let me ask you, because you go to these, you'll appear, you know, you can sign autographs, you get to meet fans. I mean, how would you feel having to move that to a virtual, you know, yeah, someone would still pay and you could do it, and maybe you have this type of interaction, but I mean, do you feel like, I mean, I feel like something would be missed from that kind of real face-to-face.
I haven't done that many conventions, and the last convention I did was quite a while ago. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I did a handful of conventions, and then I didn't do any for quite a while. And then I did a couple, like in 2010 or 2011. I did go to, and I have done Chiller. I did Chiller way back in 1993.
Yep.
1993, Debbie Rochon was there, Melissa Moore, a bunch of people I knew, a bunch of actresses I had worked with were there. And then I did go back again to Chiller around 2011 or 12 or something to promote a thing that I had done. But then I just did a couple conventions after that. I did a convention called Twisted Terror in Sacramento, but that was way back in 2013 or something. But it's been a while since I've actually gone to a convention. Every time I go to a convention, I have such a good time because you have that one-on-one, face-to-face with your fans, and people come up to you and they have things for you to sign, and it's fantastic. And then of course you get to visit with your friends who are there, and
right,
you know, they're promoting their work and films and whatever. But I have to tell you, since I'm not one of these totally convention active people who do these conventions all the time, I would just really feel like I could see where people who do conventions all the time and they don't want to miss out on being a part of a convention so that they would do the Zoom thing. But I have to tell you, I would rather be like, you know what, I'll wait till a good opportunity comes around to do the real thing, because that kind of face-to-face, physical, in the same room kind of interaction that you get with people, you can't replace it with being on Zoom.
I will say that that's been a major revitalizer for myself and lifesaver at several times in my life. I was actually working in Silicon Valley for a decade as a recruiter, a headhunter. So I was using all of my voice and all of that for other people's dreams. And it was just burning me out. And I didn't know it. It was a great job until it wasn't a great job. And then when you've got to continue to do it when it's not great, it's really, really painful.
I had a job like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up being my wife ended up saying, hey, you know what? You like horror movies. You haven't talked about horror movies. I literally wasn't talking about anything entertaining because nobody else was into my shit. And so basically she said, you know, there's this thing in Chicago. It's a reunion of Halloween, the original Halloween. They're not going to have John Carpenter, but they're going to have all the other people except for him and Jamie Lee Curtis. They're not going to show up, but everybody else will be there. Why don't you go? And I got on the plane alone, not knowing anybody. And it was not to meet them as much, but it was, these might be my people if they're doing a 1978 Halloween reunion. I might meet my guys. And all I want to do is
find your tribe.
Yep. I want to find conversation. I want to talk this shit. I want to stay up all night. This is jazz to me. What we're doing here is jazz to me. This is us cutting heads. We're having fun playing with this art that we so love in our own way. And so I went there and it was a nightmare. It was everything that I was afraid of the first day. It's just a bunch of people who knew Freddie and Jason, and that was it, with piles of memorabilia that they wanted this poor actor to sign. He's like, who's that to? Who's that to? Knowing full well that everything was going to go on eBay. And it just
with
felt
the cramped hand.
Yeah, it felt really sad. And then I met the vendors. I decided, screw it, I'm going to go talk to the vendors. And that's where you met the filmmakers who weren't out there. You know, they were selling stuff that was part, I do photographs, I do paintings, and on the side, here's my film. Would you like to take this? And
Yeah.
so I got to talk with people who had real passion about filmmaking that just wanted an in. And I got to hear some great stories, and I made friends with them, and I still hadn't found my guys. And then I found them in the lobby about 1 o'clock in the morning with all the chairs moved to a corner. Everybody wearing black t-shirts, everybody conspiratorial. I walk over like in Animal House. You guys playing cards? Except like, you guys talking horror movies? And they sat me down and said, yeah, go ahead. And they threw a couple, things at me to see what I knew. And I volleyed them back and like, ooh, okay. And before you knew it, the whole night, sunrise is coming. And there's no way to have that happen without the humidity of bodies, without the looking at somebody else's face. And I think that's what I go for. Like when I met Lance Henriksen, right? So I'm supposed to talk about James Cameron, supposed to talk about Catherine Bigelow, I'm supposed to hit Aliens, I'm supposed to hit Near Dark. I went and talking about Sidney Lumet. I was like, I want to talk about Sidney Lumet. You were in Dog Day Afternoon. You were the sharpshooter in Dog Day Afternoon. That's fucking amazing. And he had all these great stories, and he was so happy to talk about it. I mean, he loved talking about anything, but he really was appreciative that somebody wanted to talk about something a little bit off to the side that still meant a lot to him. And it was because I talk about horror in that fashion in my podcast and in here. It's not always going to be a straight line. That's great. Anybody can talk that. But the idea of talking about how it is passion that we're really excited by. And we find that in horror. We talk allegory, like your story, your film, Troy, is this wonderful allegory about where the education system is. You may not have wanted everybody to know that, but I saw it. And I can see that in a lot of films like that. And it's because your passion is there. And I don't see how you could survive without the idea of actual flesh and blood brick and mortar conventions.
But so you were talking about a hybrid, and I think at the core of it, I think you have to have the convention. But then I think you have to have something else that it's easy to project a bunch of people on a wall that are on a Zoom call, that allow people in different countries. Let's say that there's some people in Russia or some people over in Italy that can't make it, that want to join it. So you have that aspect.
Right.
One of the biggest problems, though, that I experienced early on with Zoom, even just a couple of weeks ago, is the security of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And literally there were
everywhere.
There were
Dicks
about
everywhere.
10 of us. There were 10 of us on a call, and we were having a great time. And somebody else came in, and all of a sudden there was full screen 2 guys fucking.
Right.
What?
And we're going, oh my God, what just happened? How did this happen? And we're just sitting there, just having to watch it, not knowing what it was. And it's just like, what the fuck just happened here? And then it goes away, and you're just kind of.
See, somehow I think that would make most board meetings bearable.
It's
yeah.
But
now you've got something to talk about.
It was very funny, and we laughed for 10 minutes about it. But the challenge is when you've got a room full of people like that, and that's happening every 5 or 10 minutes because you don't have control over the amount of people that are coming in. How are you going to deal with it? I mean, I'm just throwing that out because it was like, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because you're not talking about 5 people on a call. You're talking about potentially 100 people on a Zoom call or more that want to be a part of this whole thing. So,
I've done a few of these, and so far there haven't been any
no dicks yet.
Non-invited.
You're lucky.
Yeah, I've seen it, sadly enough. But
have you?
It happened to me. I was we were doing another one of these, not live, just Zoom, talking horror, and I think there were 7 of us in there, and all of a sudden someone came in and turned it around, and it was just a porno. I don't know. I was like,
really?
That shouldn't be there.
But I mean,
my eyes.
Yeah, but along those same lines, as a filmmaker, as we sit here and talk about, these conventions and film things, film festivals going virtually, I know that a huge concern for filmmakers is, if this film festival is now going virtual, how secure is my film going to be?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, can someone...
because that's a huge thing, because it ends up on a torrent site, and then
I mean, for me, like for me, that would be horrible because teacher shortage isn't even released yet. I don't, all I would need is for.
Well, and I think the other side of this, and Troy, you can probably speak to this a bit too, and Deborah, but there's an energy when you're watching your film live with an audience. There is something really special. Regardless if it's a premiere or not, having that audience, watching it with them, having your cast and crew there, if they're able to make it, having those moments to talk, engage with the audience, you lose that when it goes online. I mean, yeah, you can send the link and they might have a virtual room and people are paying, or you can do a watch party, but it's not the same. And I think that would be a really, I hope that does not happen.
Yeah.
So you can learn a lot from a regular screening about how somebody's reacting.
Yes,
right.
Because you can feel it. You can feel if you hit those moments, and it's like, are they laughing at the right moment? Are they, am I sensing tension? I'll never understand filmmakers who don't like to watch their films with an audience, because that is such a huge learning moment,
Yeah. It's interesting because we're talking about this, and Troy, your film is not out there to be seen yet, but hopefully you'll be able to put links somewhere for us to be able to have you followed, so that when it is available, lots of people get to see it. But
what's your plan? Are you going to have it go to some more fests, or has your plan changed because of all of this?
Hold on. My dogs are going nuts because someone just knocked at the door, so I'm muting.
Okay, fair enough.
Troy's dogs.
So let's talk about this kind of thing, because Troy mentioned, hey, I don't want my movie being seen when it's not available and stuff. And yet there's this idea of things going viral. Now, I'm not saying that you want something to go viral when it shouldn't be going viral, but we all live to become something viral at some point. And that brings me to the idea of cult films, like things that are found at festivals, movies that nobody knows about until they play a festival, and then all of a sudden it's like boom. Have any of
discovery?
Have any of you been involved in a discovery, like you're at a festival or anything like that, and you go, holy shit, something crazy's going on there? Or a movie that is your favorite cult film that you feel that you were part of that wave when you first heard about it, like The Room. Many people will talk about The Room in that fashion.
I feel like, and Mike, you might remember, because this is when I was living in LA, but I feel like when the Blair Witch Project first came out, before it hit theaters, there were videotapes being passed around that were not labeled.
That was part of the marketing, though. That was the brilliance of the movie.
Yeah.
That was part of the marketing. They figured it out.
I don't remember where I was working. I was working somewhere, and one of the guys there was like, oh, you got to check this out. I'm like, what is this? And they were like, oh, it's a bunch of found footage. Have you seen? And their website was set up like it was, it was brilliant. But I was part of that, because I fell for all of it. When I was watching it, I had my roommate. I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, I think it might be real. I don't know. Please watch this with me. I'm getting scared. And then it was like a few months later, it came out, and I was like, oh my God, that is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's so wonderful, and I get so disappointed by people who sit there and say, "Oh, it's nothing but a marketing game. Everything's a marketing ploy."
Right.
What's his name? And Raging Bull gaining 50 to 80 pounds is a marketing ploy. That is a stunt. Everything is a stunt in a film, and I thought it was brilliant that they.
My gaining weight for teacher shortage was a marketing ploy.
There you go.
Just kidding.
That's
but
Blair Witch
my bad.
So unique.
Yeah, Blair Witch was absolutely unique because it was the first film that really played to the understanding of what was happening with the internet.
Mm-hmm.
The internet was still relatively new. We were just
1999.
We were.
Yeah.
And so we weren't yet already at the point of going, is that true? We would see it on there. And I think that's one of the things that's great. Like, I was thinking about this movie, Last House on Dead End Street, that came out in the 70s. And it was something that you could only get on a bootleg VHS that looked like it had been done 15, 16 dubs. And the sound wasn't sync. And there was a torture sequence in there that everybody thought was real because none of the actors' names were real. Nothing. The director's name was Victor Janos, stuff like that. And you're like, oh man, this is from another country and they killed somebody. So it became this whole thing. Of course, it wasn't true. And the director just, he didn't want to put nobody wanted their names on the thing. They made it for $2,500 and they were all on meth. And so it was like, it was one of those kind of things, but it became legend and lore for decades until the early 2000s. The director actually was found and he talked about it, and then Barrel Releasing put out this beautiful DVD of it. And it was funny because Last House on Dead End Street. So yes, it's from the very beginning, it's a ripoff, but but it's a marketing thing that's brilliant because it caught on in this weird way on its own virally. It did what Blair Witch ended up doing, which is an internet legend, something that people thought that they knew. And so the Blair Witch Project did all this great stuff online, and it felt like it was real. And then you go see it. It wouldn't have worked if the movie wasn't verite, right? But that's the brilliance of that film. And I still think that it's a magnificent film. I still think that the original Paranormal Activity,
I love Blair Witch.
did not get the love that they should. I understand the sequels watered everything down. I understand that it brought a whole world of movies that we really don't want to watch because they were made poorly and all of that, and it became a trope quickly. But that doesn't denature the power of those two films. And I think that Blair Witch is astonishing. If you think about the idea now, Troy and Vanessa, give your camera to an actor, go out in the woods.
Yeah.
A radio plays. Somebody puts some rocks in front of there. Go, improvise, scene. You're going to trust your film to that? They did.
Yeah.
And that to me is phenomenal. And so I believe that many of those moments of fear are very real because they are not directed in certain ways. They are
I mean, they had their own little, I saw this thing, they used the little tiny film canisters, and they would have their notes or guidance put in there, but no two were the same.
Right.
So, like Heather's would be like, you're going to get into a fight with, what was the guy's name? Mike. But then Mike's would be like, figure out a reason to not fight, but they had no idea what. So, I would, and I'm not an actor, but I would think as an actor that would give you some really, Mike, why are your eyes?
No comment.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of like you're
that would
tired.
give them a really, I think, kind of exciting place to play as an actor. If you don't need that constant guidance,
there is
feel free and trusting.
There is that brilliant moment that is always the shot that they show always the underside of her face crying. That's the iconic shot. But the one that I absolutely love is when they run from the tent. When something grabs the tent, and there's this moment in I'm trying to remember Joel. Was it Joel? I'm trying to remember his name now. The tall
Mike, Josh. It's Josh.
Josh. Yeah, he's been in some films. He's actually been really good. Yeah. So his voice goes really warbly, like he is truly scared. And as they're running out of the tent, Heather sees somebody that they're not supposed to see. Somebody was supposed to duck and hide, but they didn't hide. And it's never explained, but she just goes, "What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?" And she keeps running, and the camera follows her. And even thinking about that, I get chills because it was so.
I just did too. It's funny. That's what's great about that movie is it has a lot of those moments that give you chills. Yeah. That horror movies are supposed to, that rarely do anymore.
Yeah. That's why when they remade it, I was so unhappy because I went to see the remake, and I know that they tried to do something relatively new with it or something fresh with the idea, but I was like, everything in this movie, down to the fake lightning, is everything that the Blair Witch Project came to free us from.
Yeah.
And you're just let's go back to the box.
That, and I wouldn't, because there's no way. Like I don't have a problem with remakes. Sometimes I think it's kind of cool to see, what somebody might do with something that was made a long time ago. But there are certain films that I'm like, because of what they did and how they did it, there's no way you can recapture that. So don't. Like, I will say, I refuse to watch the remake of Poltergeist.
Oh God, you're not.
I won't do it.
It's awful.
And I also won't watch Rocky 5, but for different reasons. But
Fair enough.
but I think the Blair Witch in that, it to me is one of those films that you can't reinvent the wheel there.
Right.
Leave it alone. It did what it did, and it was brilliant.
But I'm curious, who put up the money for the second one? Because that's really what it boils down to.
The sequel or the remake? Because they did like Blair Witch, Book of Shadows,
Yeah,
which was a studio film.
If you're talking about the remake, I'm wondering who put up the money for it. Because a lot of times money, if you throw a lot of money at a movie that's already been successful and a new
The
person
original
comes in, those people have a lot of
the
control.
original filmmakers came back with it, though. Weren't they behind it?
What,
I'm
the
not sure.
remake?
That's what I'm
I don't
wondering.
The
think
remake.
so. Adam
No.
Wingard.
Adam
Wingard was-
Wingard and
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, which
well,
was
then
really
extra
disappointing.
no.
Yeah. Well, it was really disappointing because I really like and respected Adam
Oh,
Wingard's
they-
early work.
The Guest and You're Next.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought really strong stuff, good genre, and I was really disappointed because it was very flat, and I didn't quite I thought, well, what's he going to bring to it that might be interesting? So here's a question. It's a great conversation I have a lot with people, which is sequels and remakes. If you had to pick one, where do you think you have the opportunity for the better film, in a sequel or in a remake?
God,
I
it just
guess it would-
depends on the movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
I'm not a big fan of remakes. I mean, sequels are one thing, but to remake the original,
You know, I used to think that. I really did. But then you look at something
Right.
like The Thing. And to me, I think that the remake
oh, well, that's different.
was
The Thing
great.
Brilliant.
The
Thing
Fly,
was-
But
the
it's
thing.
the
The Fly. Oh, well, I am wrong.
throw your answer out the window. But
Sorry.
no, but then you've got the remake of Poltergeist. Why would you do that?
Right.
I want someone to anscer why you would do that.
Right. It's all money. I think it's, yeah, it's
I don't care.
The first, I don't remember. I don't think I saw the remake of Poltergeist, but the first Poltergeist scared the bejesus out of me.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That was freaking scary.
Yeah.
that movie makes an imprint, I think, on anyone. You could go up to even non-horror fans. You mentioned Poltergeist. Everyone has a very visceral, very strong memory of when and where and how they saw that.
I think one
Yeah.
of the reasons is because the acting is so damn good in it.
Acting
Yeah.
is
Family
so
is real.
good.
Beatrice Straight, she does in Lumet's
Yeah.
network. She does a conversation with her husband that won her an Academy Award. She does this movie. She does a same thing in a movie called what is it called? Rod Serling wrote it about corporate takeover. What's it called? And she's talking to her
Power?
husband. What's that?
Power.
It's not Power. It was made in the 50s, and boy, I can't.
Sure.
I'm completely drawing a blank. But nobody does a monologue like her. Nobody does a monologue like her. And the monologue that she's talking about, all the souls and stuff.
Yes.
The acting of that scene just brings that movie. Now, not just Jo Beth Williams and Craig Nelson, they're both great. Jo Beth is fantastic.
Yeah.
But Beatrice Straight just brings that movie into I feel,
Yeah.
another dimension because she's so amazing.
There's
She's
a
such
moment in Poltergeist that sells it completely. And it is
believable, totally
yeah.
believable.
it is when Jo Beth Williams is about to go into the light to go get her kid, and she turns to Craig T. Nelson. She goes, "Don't let go." And he goes, "Never."
Yeah.
And the look in her eyes and the way that she says that, almost with a fearful child, that's that whole thing of a close relationship. That's so, and it's sold. Everything.
And when the daughter passes through her, she goes, and it's like, oh shit, she really passed through her soul, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't see that
Tears
in
in her
those
eyes.
movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's
So
like, you know,
brilliant.
grabbing her shirt, and she's like, I can smell her. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah. These
That's
are
Amazon. I just watched it last week.
Yeah, these are magnificent moments in horror films. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. The reason I bring up the sequel versus remake thing is it's almost like when people say that a good book doesn't make a good movie and you can make a good movie out of a bad book and stuff like that. I almost feel, I don't think there's a golden rule for either of those. I don't think that there's an absolute to any of that. I also think there's things like Daphne du Maurier's The Birds and Hitchcock's Birds are both magnificent masterpieces, and they're completely different, even though they're from the same thing.
I just finally read it.
Yay.
And I told you that I was having weird interactions with birds afterwards. And I was like, they know.
So I just think that for me, if I had to pick between sequels versus remakes, and there's shit in both, I think the chance of more artistic brilliance happens in a remake, because you are taking something that may be thoroughly outdated, like The Fly or The Thing, or you may have a movie that, like The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and you can
The
sit
Wasp
there.
Woman. The Wasp Woman was a good remake.
Yeah, there you go. So you can have remakes that suck, and we're talking about all of them. Poltergeist, these are all money makers, right? Then you have something like the Evil Dead remake, which is a truly powerful film that's super violent, but also says something about addiction, which is really interesting. That the
But you
first
know,
one didn't do.
speaking to that particular film, Scott, do you really feel like do you really feel like the Evil Dead remake is a remake? Because that really feels
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
so many changes that I almost feel like it's
well, the
a
original
different story in that universe.
Yeah, the original Thing and Carpenter's The Thing. There's not much very close. In fact, his thing really goes back to the source material of the book. Who goes there? The short story. Yeah. They're very much like that. That's the thing about remakes, right? They tend to take all it's like alchemy. You have lead, and that's the movie that used to be The Car, with James Brolin. And then you sit there and you go, what can I do to remake this thing? I know, instead of it having a week's worth of The Car showing up, have it be one day, real time, and instead of it going after just people, it's going after, say, a Black Lives Matter. All of a sudden, you've got a really interesting story that's politically charged and all kinds of scary, and that's the same fucking movie. And that's the kind of thing that a remake will do. A remake can take an idea that is kind of dead and add something to it. But we get the excitement because the first idea was pretty good. Like The Fly. The Fly, if you watch the first one, I mean, it's a police procedural. That starts with a scientist's head in a vice, and the police coming and talking to the wife who murdered the guy, and they're having tea, and then she tells the entire story. Yeah. Love Vincent Price, but it's a very silly movie.
Okay, so I have a question then, while we're talking about remakes and sequels. Troy and Debra, I guess if you guys had a chance to get your hands on either a role to kind of, take your own spin on it, or, Troy, for you to take a film that you would like to put your own spin on. What do you guys think
you would remake?
Like what would you remake, or what role would you like to breathe new life into?
I would and here, I mean, it's been done already. It's been done twice. It's been remade twice, but it hasn't been remade very well. So I would love to do it, and it's Carrie? Yeah. Because I feel like now, especially in this day and age, that it could be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And both of the remakes, there was a made-for-TV movie remake with Angela Bettis, and then the one that came out with Chloe Moretz and Angela. Julianne.
That's one of those movies where I love the original so much that
there was also The Rage.
Carrie.
Yes, Carrie too. Sequel.
Yeah. But I feel like that would be an interesting film, like to take a different perspective and not maybe necessarily worrying about trying to copy the original film, which I feel like the first two or the two remakes did, and give it kind of a modern day telling or touch. It's one of my favorite. I mean, Carrie's one of my favorite films.
I think
brilliant.
I think some movies dance.
I like the remakes of Carrie. I like the one with Julianne Moore. Is that with Chloe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. That one I actually did.
I liked it.
Like, I prefer the original, but I think they did a good job with that. I did not like the made-for-TV one.
Which one was that?
It came out, I think, early 2000s or late 90s. I'm trying to remember.
Who was
Um,
in it?
It was around 2000. It had Angela Bettis and Patricia Clarkson
Thank you.
played the mom.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, I like the other one with Julianne Moore better.
Which
Was
is
the TV
interesting.
one watered down? Was it watered down, the television version?
Not really. Actually, what's really interesting is of the three films, the made-for-TV one follows the book way more closely than the other two films.
That's
Oh
interesting.
yeah, I saw that one too. I did see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the made-for-TV film, it was a miniseries. It follows the book way more closely than the
That's-
actual TV or
that's-
the.
Interesting, because that could be really scrambled. I mean, the book is classic, right? But it's told in like anecdotes.
Yeah.
It's like after the fact. She's already set fire to the school and everything. She's dead, and they're talking to all the kids, and you're finding out what Carrie
Yeah.
was actually
Like
like.
the made-for-TV film is the only version where she destroys the whole town like she does in the book.
Right.
Kills her mom by stopping her heart. It's completely
Yeah.
it's more faithful to the, and you get all the courtroom interviews going on throughout the film. So it's kind of interesting that that's the one people like the least because it's the most faithful to the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I did like that one too. I saw that one too.
Yeah.
But I just happened to really like Julianne Moore.
yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
she's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Deborah, to kind of follow up with that, is there a role that you've just loved or seen that you would just love to try to sink your teeth into and breathe new life into it?
You know, I did a film back in 2013, which was released a couple years later, but it was called A Blood Story. So I play Elizabeth Bathory. But in that film, my character is not the focal character because it's played in modern day time, and Frances, I can't remember the last name. I'm having a hard time remembering.
We'll just go with Frances.
So Francis, played by Camden Toy, he's trying to bring his wife Elizabeth Bathory back to life. So, but in that film, my character is actually just kind of almost like a side story. So it's not really. It's not about Elizabeth Bathory. So what I would like is I would like to do an actual film about Elizabeth Bathory.
Okay. Yeah. That would be pretty cool.
Not totally answering your question, but I can't think of anything else.
No, I mean, that answers it. I mean, I think anytime there's a story that's just, kind of grabs you to say, oh, God, I would like to explore that.
Well,
Yes.
but Deborah, you already got to play a really iconic character. You got to play Mrs. Bates.
I'm sorry?
You already got to play a really iconic character. You got to play Mrs. Bates.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yes. You know what? That is one of my favorite roles to date, was I got to play Norman Bates' mother, Mrs. Bates, in Mother. It's called Mother.
Nice.
It's on YouTube. You can look it up, Debra Lamb and Mother. And yeah, so
We will,
that was, thank you, Troy. I like that one.
Yeah, we will be. I have a couple links, and what I'm going to do is put in the Facebook page, in the links, so people can go to that after watching this, and they will be able to see some clips from Mother and a few other things.
Okay.
So I got a question. For you guys. What horror movie do you think will always be able to be remade, no matter what time in the future it is?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Okay.
That was quick.
Yeah.
There should be one for every decade.
That wins.
I think you're right. And there will be one for this decade too, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And like
Well,
Dracula can be made at any time.
Yeah.
At any
I
time.
was gonna say that, people do not ever tire from Dracula, vampires, zombies, and
Frankenstein.
classic monster characters like the Mummy and the werewolf, and just those classic. Those are classics. People will not ever tire of those. They're just fun stories that people love, and especially with all the like the Bigfoot finder people, the people trying to find Bigfoot,
Yeah.
and these
The Bigfoot finder people, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
The Bigfoot
There's
finder
so many
people.
Bigfoot films. I don't know.
There are.
and just all the creatures out there that could really exist, that we don't know. They could be out there, it's possible.
But
So, like the Yeti. So those kind of things that it's like these creatures are very possibly out there, and aliens, of course. But yeah, all those stories, definitely.
But
I
I
think
think that
anytime you, I'm sorry, Mike, you go.
No, go ahead.
No, you say better things.
I disagree. But I think the best ones that would adapt are the ones that are rooted in human behavior.
Yes.
Because they're basically, their subtext is something that is about us. That the monster is us.
Yeah.
And I think that the best ones, like Invasion of the Body Snatcher, is always something political.
Yeah.
And that will always be.
It's always
you'll
about
always be able
identity.
to-
What
What's
makes
that?
us us? It's always about identity. What makes us us? What could change us? What would it be to lose yourself, right?
Yeah,
I
because
love
Invaders from Mars is basically the same concept, isn't
I
it?
was just going to say that. One,
Yeah.
I've seen it, and I've seen it so many times. I love Invaders
which
from
one?
Mars. Invaders from Mars. Karen Black is in that, right?
Yeah.
That's the Toby Hooper remake.
Yeah, it's Toby Hooper.
Okay,
Oh,
that's the
I
one
never
that I
saw
know.
that one.
That's the one that I know.
The first one's great. It's got some great stuff
Yeah.
in it.
Oh, it's creepy
great.
as hell. The kid
When
is
Dad
creepy.
comes up and there's that close-up shot of him, that's something that hits me in the face every time.
Yeah.
That movie
God.
affected me. The
Wait, it's
remake.
called Invaders of Mars.
Invaders from Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
have to watch that. I have.
And it's about people being taken over by political ideas, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I think that's what's gonna come out of this year. I think we're gonna get horror movies that are gonna be about people being taken over by that.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is,
there's the movie They Live. That's
Yeah.
that's a great. I watched
Yeah,
that last
I love
week.
it. I love it.
It's so much fun.
I have a couple that I would say. There's a Joe Dante short film or an hour-long film that he made for Masters of Horror called The Screwfly Solution. I think it's
I
off
heard
of
of that.
Joe
I heard of
Lansting.
that.
It's masterful. It's the Screwfly was a genetically engineered fly to get rid of a different invasive plant or invasive insect. And what it did is a screw fly ended up killing the cattle in the farms where this stuff was. So it's all about the idea that either nature is going to do something to get rid of its major problems, maybe us, or it's how our best laid plans don't work. So this is a really interesting idea. It is that something is happening on the planet and it's following the line of heat. Wherever it's hottest is where it starts. And it goes across the lines of longitude. Men are murdering women, and they don't even recognize that they're murdering the women. And it is this thing that is attacking the sex drive. When men are becoming sexually stimulated, there's this part in the I'm forgetting the part of the brain where it comes from, but it makes a serotonin and everything. It's exactly the same as violence. Sex and violence are at one point the same in the body. And so this is a movie where as men are sexually stimulated, they're killing the women. And so there's like, why, what is happening? And it's the way to make this species extinct. And it starts to take the memory away as well. So it's a really intriguing thing where at one point, and it came out a little bit after 9/11, and there's a scene where the women are trying not to be seen. You know, they're trying to, like, if they could wear burqas, they would. And the women are getting killed and the men aren't even noticing it. And so these women are trying to get on a plane. And there's this
What's it
called
called?
the screw fly solution.
Oh.
And so there's this moment where this woman gets on the plane and she realizes that she's surrounded by men, and this one guy starts to raise his voice to another woman, and she starts to freak out. She's like, "Get me off the plane, please, get me off the plane." And the male attendant comes up and starts punching her in the face and says, "Shut up." And everybody goes like this, and the movie right then gets super serious, and you start to feel all the rage around 9/11 and the battle that's happening now between sexes.
Mm.
It is so eerie and it is brilliant because it's not even like anybody knows. And there's another really low budget movie called The Signal, not the one with Lawrence Fishburne. This is from a little bit earlier, where there is this signal that comes on TVs, just flashes for a few moments, and it causes homicidal rage, and it also causes forgetfulness. And it's really
5G.
yeah, 5G. So it's kind of, I guess, an attack on that 5G idea. And so it's really, I love that, where there are these horror movies that are coming out where people don't remember their kids. What one did I watch recently where it was this creature would look at you and you would forget people around you. And it was erasing your life little by little. And it was such a great idea. These are all about identity. These are all children of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This book by Jack Finney back in the 50s. You know, and that was made. I could go on and on. I could do an entire story on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because even the original movie by Don Siegel, and I think his name was Llewellyn, the guy who wrote it. Everything about that movie was in opposition. Don Siegel was a very right-wing guy, and the guy who wrote it was a blacklisted guy. And the writer of the book just wanted to make a buck. And so no matter which way you look at it, there's something that balances out, where it's not like burning tires of the political statement or the social statement. It's balanced out by everybody, just kind of these different opposing viewpoints coming together in this film. And it made something that anybody can watch that film and they will see something. There was an entire thing about it being about communism and McCarthyism, right? There's the entire thing about it being the world of the 50s, you know, the status quo, turning everybody gray. And all those are correct in a way, because it's all subtext. They kept,
but it wasn't intent. I think what they said was it wasn't intentional to do that, but because that was so inherent in what was going on in society that it just bled through into that type of story, which is why everybody could really relate to it.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't know why, but they knew something was going on.
I believe what Toby Hooper said, which is, we don't know what our movies are about for 20 years.
Right.
Because the artist is not in a jar, right?
Right.
The artist is living through all of this shit. And maybe there are artists that are sitting there going, how can I take this and put it in there? But there are other artists that it's just in you now. You know, you wouldn't think twice about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, whatever your point is. But that's now part of it, you know, and that's going to come into your art somehow. So whether you know it or not, you may still be commenting. And why? Because we're talking about this pure emotion of horror. You know, it's the only genre named after an emotion. And I think that it has this truth to it, because it has to go to an intensity. It has to speak to an anxiety. And so we're anxious about what's happening in the world at any given time. So I think whether we like it or not, that stuff shows up. If you're making a movie about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think Carpenter's The Thing was the perfect movie for the 80s, which is why it was so hated. You know,
I love The Thing. What are you talking about? It was hated?
It was a bomb when it first came out.
Yeah, it was I think even Roger Ebert said it was very uneven, and a lot of people called it a gore fest.
Yeah, even
now,
worse.
Was that the one that he came back later and then kind of redacted his original review?
Plenty did. Many critics did. But what's even more disgraceful is
brilliant.
Starlog. Yeah, it wasn't just those guys. You could sit there and say something about it being, Ebert and everybody, they're on their high ivory tower. But the thing that killed The Thing was Starlog magazine and Cinefantastique. They all panned it. They told him that I have a review where it says, here are things that John Carpenter should do outside of directing. He should direct traffic accidents. They had this whole list of things, calling him an inept fool. And
what?
Yep, and that it was
For
porn.
The Thing?
Other people called it porn. Yeah.
Wow.
And now I will say I saw it in the theater the day it opened, because The Thing was a seminal movie for my dad's generation. The Howard Hawks one was very much a lot of people's favorites. It played to that time period.
Well, sure, that was
Hawks
good
themes.
too. But come on, Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Hawks's themes are all over that. So when my dad went to see it, there's a thing about Carpenter. Carpenter was like a bridge director. He had enough love for John Wayne and he had enough love for Howard Hawks that even when he was making modern films, there was this respectable bridge that allowed my dad to come across. His movies, even like Assault on Precinct 13, was very Rio Lobo.
So great.
Bravo. Yeah, all of these things that my dad watched, and he never had like big scenes of tits and stuff that would drive my dad crazy, right? My dad was a very John Wayne guy, and there was something about Carpenter where he was the modern director that my dad could handle because he was classy in the way that my dad saw class. And when he went to see, he thought that The Thing was going to be a masterpiece because here's Howard Hawks' The Thing, his favorite movie of all time, going to be done by this director that he loves. And instead, Carpenter swung for the fences and hit a home run, but no one was ready for that home run. They all were like, well, we like the 50s version. We're in the 80s, which is 50s part 2. How dare you sit there and start talking about how we don't trust each other anymore? How dare you start talking about how we're losing our identities? It was so brilliant. What he did was attack the Reagan administration in a very interesting way. And nobody was ready for that. Nobody wanted it. And I saw it in the theater, and I remember people booing and getting angry.
What?
Fathers were angry. They brought their sons. It was so funny. The first weekend, which I believe was like a Memorial Day weekend or sometime or early June, and we're waiting to see The Thing, and it was like this bonding moment for parents, dads and sons, not sisters and mothers, but dads and sons. There were pairs of men and boys going into this place to sit down and watch this movie that everybody thought was going to be this macho treatise. And the first thing you see is a nose ring and an earring on one of the characters, and in a 50-foot, 80-foot screen, it's huge. And in 1982, in Coal Mine, Pennsylvania, that earring and that nose meant something else. And so everybody's a little disgusted already. Then there's a little bit of gore. Then the gore gets bigger. By the time that we have this magnificent effect that everybody loves now, by the time that happens, my dad and every father the submission, and every son is embarrassed. It's like watching sex in front of your dad. And so we're embarrassed because we feel our dads so upset, so disappointed, and we're scared. And that's what happened with me. I walked out of there like I had seen a car accident, and I couldn't get it out of my head. My dad forgot that he ever saw it. He will never speak of this movie again. But me and all the kids my age that went to see that, and there weren't that many, we all got Fangoria number 27, which had all these shots inside of it. And it was as if we were looking at sacred text, because no film had ever fucked with us that bad. And I will say that even though I'd seen The Exorcist by then, I had seen Alien, that was in 79. I had seen Suspiria. Nothing freaked me out as much as seeing the original year, seeing The Thing in the theater, because it wasn't just gory. It was blasphemy of the body. It was this weird madness, disgusting grotesquerie of the body, which is what makes it so brilliant and amazing now. But it was really disturbing when it first came out. Now people can look at it with 30, 40 years of distance, and it's genius. And I feel bad for Carpenter, because here was his home run, a grand slam, and it put him in a coffin for several years.
Yeah,
he lost Firestarter.
Making new movies, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up having to go back to indie low budgets. He had to make apology movies. That's what he called Starman. Starman is his apology movie.
I love Starman.
Yeah.
I remember Starman.
Yeah,
I
like
love
Starman.
I loved it too. I loved it too. But he said he made that because his agent said, you need to apologize. They're still not forgiving you for The Thing.
That's fascinating.
What? The Thing is one of my all-time very favorite movies of all time.
About now, everybody is. That I think sticks in his craw too, because when he needed us, we weren't there. The fans weren't there. The critics weren't there. The celebrities weren't there. Him and Kurt Russell are good friends. They've made several films together. And Kurt Russell was the only person who came out and talked about the movie. But everybody else was like, You know, so I always give Kurt Russell some kudos because I think he's always been a brave fellow, and I think he's just one of those guys. He was a 12-year-old making movies for Disney. The guy knows the business in and out.
The world's strongest man, and
computer that wore tennis shoes.
The Thing actually gave him an opportunity. Wasn't that one of the first movies that he did that gave him an opportunity to break that old character mold like nothing?
Oh yeah,
before?
Absolutely.
He completely breaks it. I mean,
that's why he loves Carpenter so much. Carpenter gave him Elvis. He did Elvis when he was doing this Disney stuff.
Oh, that's
cool movie too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember.
A cool movie.
Yeah, I love it, and I remember knowing that it was Carpenter and being like, and Carpenter was one of those guys that just kind of, I'll have to do a Carpenter show sometime.
That was a made-for-TV movie too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Television, right? But then it was released in other. Because I have a really nice Thai movie poster for John Carpenter's Elvis.
Oh,
wow. They took a lot of those movies, and because they were good enough, they re-released them in theaters, in actual movie theaters in other countries. Elvis was one.
He was the guy that made me feel, you know, I grew up at a time when the film critics were gods. And I forget who I was talking about this with, but we were talking about different groups that own everything, like fashion is owned by like 5 people, and whatever they say is fashionable, that's what everybody finds fashionable. But it's so arbitrary what is considered fashion, what is not. And at a time, Andrew Sarris, Pauline Kael, Charles Champlin, and a few people were the critics for everyone, and everybody read those guys, and that was what our film language became. A couple film classes are what gave us the 70s. You had everybody in NYU going to the same classes. You had everybody going to UCLA and USC in these same classes, and they all lived in bodegas together. And then we have all of these directors making the movies that shape an entire time frame. And I think that some people get lost in that. I think Carpenter should be thought of in a much higher way. But I grew up at a time when The Exorcist was considered art, because Billy Friedkin made it. And so that allowed these critics to put it up there. And people forget that Jaws was up for Best Picture. So 2 movies very quickly when I was a child were horror films that were being taken seriously. Why wouldn't I grow up thinking that horror deserves to be taken seriously? Right. The first guy that got it there again was Carpenter. Now, there were great horror films like Tobe Hooper's Chainsaw Massacre, but there was always the ability to look at it as trashy, right? With that name and all that. But Carpenter's Halloween somehow transcended that by being very much in the world of Hitchcock, very much having that kind of weird style, looking better than it should for the money that it was made for. I would say that you would say that. Yeah.
And it's the technique that can be, and he was
such
nobody
skill.
In the Steadicam and whatnot.
Yeah,
so
he had great technique, great skill. He took risks. He put all his money in the Donald Pleasance basket. He ended up having a DP who had, it wasn't even a Steadicam, it was a Panaglide. It was the first version of that, which was even clunkier and heavier, which is why I think the camera operator's name was Ray Stella, and he nearly killed his back going up the stairs in that first shot. Here we have a low-budget film made for $320,000, made by a second-time filmmaker, first-time distributor Mustafa Akkad. You've got no stars in it whatsoever, and his idea is we're going to have an opening shot that runs the entire length of one reel of film. And it's going to be a redoing of kind of like Touch of Evil. So he decides, you know what, my second movie, we have no money. The actors are the ones that are painting the sets and everything. Let's try and do what Orson Welles did in Touch of Evil on a slasher film. Genius. And that was the thing that made me feel that horror could be legitimized. So to me, Carpenter stands with Cronenberg and a few others as directors who deserve to be thought of as more than just average filmmakers. These are guys that their craft and their art transcends that stuff. They allow.
I have a question, Scott. Because I think of them that way. I do think of them, and I think of George Romero as one of the great American film directors.
I think Tobe Hooper too. That's argued, but I
even though it's low budget, but my question to you is, who do you think doesn't think of John Carpenter on that level?
Well, now it's vogue to think that way. I remember
But that's what
in the
matters
80s.
is what's up now, though,
Yeah,
right?
right.
I
What's
mean,
up now?
What goes down in the history books is what matters.
Yeah. Well,
So do you feel there are people now that don't, who would now not think of him?
No, I don't know if there's anybody who would not think of him highly. It makes sense to think of him highly now because there's so much. He's had so much influence. There's been every one of his movies, I think, has been remade now. So you have not only is he doing that, he's the only true auteur. If you're going to sit there and talk about the auteur theory, here's a guy who wrote, he directed, he edited by the name Frank Armitage on several of his films. He did the soundtrack for his films. Basically, it's his shit.
Well, all of it, unlike other directors, his name's above the title.
Right. Yeah.
So
Once
who else has that?
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody has that now. And he got shit for that. He got shit for that for the longest time. It's so funny how things are different now. I remember in the 80s how people would they'd see pictures of him and go, that scrawny little runt made Halloween. Huh? And they would joke about him. And it's like, oh yeah, Carpenter. Yeah, he does those iconoclast films or anti-hero. I remember saying that to somebody, have you seen John Carpenter's movie? He goes, oh, Carpenter, that guy, what ones are some of his movies? Oh yeah, he makes those anti-hero movies. And so it was like he was the low life guy. And he even talks about that. He has that great quote, in France, I'm an artist. In Germany, I'm a filmmaker. In England, I'm an auteur. In America, I'm a bum. And that's his thing for it across the globe. Right. He's always been given something, but him as this American director, he's always given shit. A very telling thing was Guillermo del Toro went to lunch with him a while ago, and there was this moment of passion from Guillermo del Toro one day on Twitter when he just was sitting in an airport and he was watching on his iPad The Thing, and he just decided to put out like 40 emails or 40 tweets in a row. We do not appreciate John Carpenter. And he goes down this whole thing of how John Carpenter's The Thing, The Fog, all these movies deserve so much praise. He said, I got to meet John Carpenter and have lunch with him. And I decided to tell him as a fellow artist and director how much I love his movies and how much he's beloved now. Carpenter never looks up at me. He keeps eating and he says, yeah, what's that going to get me now? Where were you then?
Yeah.
So he's still hurting big time from that. But he's one of the few guys that got to see it while he was alive, right? So many great directors. I mean, for all that we're saying about Carpenter, you also have John Ford was pretty much unknown. John Sturges, pretty much unknown. These guys weren't working. You had these guys that made film. They created the Hollywood system. Cecil B. DeMille wasn't getting calls in his 80s. These guys stopped working, all of them. And they were just sitting there waiting for guys like Peter Bogdanovich to suddenly appear.
Yeah.
And say, hey, can I sit around and scribble some notes and make a book about you? They waited for, if it wasn't for Francois Truffaut and Godard, most of our filmmakers, American filmmakers, would never have been revered. We mock the auteur theory, but that fucking thing gave us pretty much everything that we've got now. It may be outdated and outmoded at this point because of the way that films are made. But at one point, Cahiers du Cinema gave us what we got now. Yeah.
It's like the painter who's not good until he's dead.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We all love them when they're dead. Yeah. But
well, I have to go because my dinner is waiting.
It's time to go.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Time to eat.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to end. How about we round, folks? Troy, Debra, let people know where they can follow you and where they can see your work.
I'm on Facebook. I have a fan page, but I haven't really been using it. But I have a private page, a regular page, Debra Lamb. I'm on Instagram as @the_Debra_Lamb. I'm on Twitter @the_Debra Lamb. I mean, I'm really easy to find.
Good, because we're going to find you.
You can look me up on IMDb. You can Google me. It's that easy.
Love it.
And Troy?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, obviously, Troy Escamilla. I don't have a fan page because I'm not that important yet. But I'm on,
Make one anyway.
yeah, right. And I'm on Instagram. Troy ESC is my Instagram handle. But if you search for me, you'll find me on Instagram. And my first two films, Party Night and Mrs. Claus, are both on Amazon Prime to watch for free. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can check them out. Or Tubi, they're on Tubi. And Teacher Shortage, just kind of stay tuned because hopefully I'll have some news regarding its release soon.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you guys so much.
I have to say real quick, it was such a joy working with Troy, and I hope to get to work with him again.
Well, thank you. It was a joy working with you. We had a blast.
We did. We sure did.
Well, it was a real treat getting to meet both of you and to spend some time talking all this fun stuff. And I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
It was
Good
so
luck.
much fun. Thank you for having us on.
Good luck with your
Of
film.
course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye,
And
everybody.
everyone out there who's still watching, you stay hell bent. Be well.
Yes. Good night.